Welcome to the live stream. I hope we're live because otherwise I'm talking to no one and just myself, which is fine. But everybody, welcome to the stream. Thank you so much for joining me. I have a very, very special guest. As you know, he is an awesome content creator. I love his channel. He's actually been posting a ton of content that is super awesome about setting up Dolby Atmos and stuff. And someone in the comments already called him Ethan, so that will be his name throughout the stream now. Ethan. Everybody, welcome Ethan Osborne to the stream.
Hi. Hello.
Hello. So
yes,
actually,
I'm Ethan Osborne. No relation to Ethan Allen.
oh, Ethan Allen. Really? This stream is going to go so well. So welcome, Ethan. Thank you. Ethan, wow. See, it's happening. It's happening. So Elon, though, thank you so much for joining me. We have a lot to talk about. A lot of people may know me or may know you and may not know the other person. So, my name's Brad, home theater gamer. I make videos about home theater. I do a lot of mini DSP videos and stuff like that. I recently went through and basically converted a spare bedroom in my house to a dedicated theater room. And Ethan, geez, wow, I'm doing it, aren't I? Elon actually did the same thing. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you did there in your house or actually it was a shed, right?
Yes. So it was originally a grow shed. When we first walked into the shed just to check it out, it still had soil, kind of scattered throughout. Still had some like wood on the ground where all the planters used to be, fans lining the entire thing just to keep it cool, but also this gigantic AC unit with huge pipes. Just, it was overkill. Like even for a grow shed, it was probably, I've never run a grow shed before, so I really don't know what I'm talking about, but just ginormous pipes. Like this particular AC unit could have powered like an office building.
Wow.
So I took out all the pipes, just because there's the shed itself where he was growing all the marijuana was in this little space beyond the front door. When you first walk into the shed, there was like this little, I don't know, 5-foot area that just had nothing, and then it was the actual grow shed. So I took out the wall to that second area because it was really getting in the way of me putting a theater in, because I wanted the theater to go all the way to the end of that first wall when you first walk in. So that sucked, having to demo all that. But then I put up some walls to where I wanted the shed, and like honestly, because right now the door to the theater is right when you walk in. So basically, you walk into the shed, and behind the outside door of the shed is the door to the theater.
Yeah.
So looking back on it, though, I probably would have liked the shed to be, or the door to be over here in the back of the theater, just because it's kind of intrusive having to come in and out so close to the front LCR, whereas I kind of got some room to play with in the back of the shed, or the back of the theater. So if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have put the door back there. But whatever. But it was a slow going process. But from there I drilled holes throughout all the studs so I could run some wire through it.
Yeah.
Run speaker wire all over before I put the drywall up.
Sucks. Yeah. I mean, we were people don't know this. Obviously, we had a test stream, or not really even a stream. We just wanted to kind of work out any technical difficulties last night before this. And we were just going to hang out for like 15-20 minutes. Well, 2 hours went by. We were still talking. So we shared a lot of our experiences, and I'm not envious of what Elon did. because I mean, you did way more construction in the actual room than I did. You know, I just put up a drop ceiling and painted the walls and made some acoustic panels. But like you went full on, man. You made walls. You did all this stuff. You put walls up. Like watching your videos, I'm like, okay, I thought I had it bad, but like in perspective, no way. Like you really put the time in. So, again, man, thank you so much for joining me here. And you know, we're just gonna have a good time talking about this stuff. I did want to say hi to everybody in the chat real quick. Hi, everybody. Okay, now let's move on. No, I'm just kidding. I do want to let you know that if anyone has a question, put a big old Q up before your question. We'll try to answer these throughout the stream, but I will be marking them a lot through StreamYard. This is also my first time using StreamYard, so if there's any issues, blame StreamYard. It's not my fault. That StreamYard, I'm using the free version, so. But we're going to have a good time. I just want to say hi to everybody. Kevin Gardner is here. Kevin Gardner has been a longtime supporter of my channel. I think he's active on your channel as well, Elon. And him and I email back and forth all the time. He's really awesome. He's running to his house for some cookies. This was earlier, so he's back now. So hi, Kevin. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Chris Ditch Digger 1116. Hello. Thank you for joining. Justin, I was talking to Justin a little bit prior to the stream starting. Thanks for joining. And it does look and sound great. Again, if there's any problems, blame StreamYard.
Yeah.
No, but StreamYard's actually, I'm absolutely amazed that this is all free. It's like super easy to use. So,
yeah, truly.
Mike Ortiz, thanks to both of you guys. Y'all really have helped me plan out my spare bedroom setup, still in progress. That's what I love to hear. I love helping people, and Elon says hi. Not that you can't see him or hear him, but but yeah, I mean, both you know, Mike and Justin actually had a similar comment, and yeah, that's honestly why I do it. I want to try to entertain and educate through the entertainment. You know, we can all watch, you know, super boring how-to tutorial videos that are, you know, 10, 15 years old, but like, I don't know, I just want to try to spice it up and make it so, you know, you have fun while you're watching it, but also you may come away with some information. So
yeah,
I'm just going to mark some comments here. Oh, Easy HT Tech. This is Ike, actually. He was with me at Cedia.
oh, cool.
When Michael and I at Cedia. So he made it. Awesome to have you here, Ike. Thanks for joining the stream. I'm going to mark some comments here real quick. But yeah, so we're just going to talk about all of the home theater musings that we went through during our time building all this stuff. And I guess, you know, we kind of bounce back and forth. We're just going to have a conversation more so than like, I'm not going to ask him, you know, a bunch of direct questions. We're just kind of going to go with the flow. We're going to be answering some questions at the end, but we might kind of, you know, veer off topic a little bit. It is around Halloween. So I figured I'm going to throw this out to you, Ethan, because I didn't even ask you about this last night. I thought about this while I was going for my run this morning. But if you had your favorite Halloween like horror movie, what would that be? And then also, do you have some offhand movies that you like, horror movies that you go to for demoing surround sound speaker setups?
Aha.
I should have asked you this last night so you could prepare.
Oh, well, gosh, now that you put me on the spot, of course my mind goes blank.
Do you want me to start?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, so my favorite horror film of all time is the Shining, Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, not the miniseries from Stephen King. And I know that's slightly different, but I just love, it's such a slow burn movie, and you can tell just how manic everybody was. And I know Kubrick is notorious for being difficult to work with because he wants what he wants and that's it. Like, you don't get a say. But it's still my favorite horror movie. My wife cannot watch it. It's just too much for her, but I do love it. As far as like demo disc, I really wouldn't use that as like a demo. I mean, it is from the 70s. It looks great for what it is on 4K Blu-ray, but my go-tos are like The Conjuring 2. I think Annabelle Creation was another one. All of these have like Atmos mixes. And then Dr. Sleep actually had some pretty cool sequences in it. And there's one I can't think of. I'm going to throw out TV shows as well. Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor, and Midnight Mass all have some really great Atmos scenes kind of peppered throughout. They're not, Dolby Atmos reference material all the way through, but there's one episode of Haunting of Hill House in particular where something comes crashing through the ceiling, and it literally sounds like it's crashing through the ceiling.
Oh,
and
wow.
it's super cool. So, but those are mine. That is, yeah. Oh, and Justin said A Quiet Place Part 2. I actually have not seen the second one. That's on my I own it, but I haven't actually, I think I bought it during our move, so I wasn't able to pop it in and check it out. The first one, there was that scene where they were I think they were hiding, and you could hear the monster climbing on the roof or climbing on the second story, and it just sounded like he was above you in the room. I'm like, is something in our attic? What's going on? This is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, now that you mentioned all those horror movies, I guess I'm not as big of a fan of horror as I thought I was, because especially owning horror movies, I honestly hardly own any. But I will say that as you were talking about your favorites, A Quiet Place 1 and 2 definitely did pop into my mind, because I do own those two. And I just love that world in particular, just because it is so audio based. I love it when there's a particular movie that focuses on the audio, maybe because one person is deaf, or maybe if somebody's blind too.
Right.
So with A Quiet Place 1 and 2, there's obviously the deaf daughter that they're dealing with. So I love it when it goes back and forth between, chaos to just almost absolute quiet when it's the daughter's perspective. Because a lot of times during those scenes, when you are seeing it from the daughter's eyes, you can hear this faint heartbeat too. That's the only thing you can hear is a heartbeat, and maybe some muffled, low frequency sounds, whatever. But
that stuff is really cool, how it kind of it becomes like this immersive experience. And I think that's what a lot of people, maybe if they're watching on their phone or something, miss out on. Even with headphones, you don't get that same visceral experience that you get when you are completely just immersed in sound.
Yeah.
So
because that's just on this topic, that's kind of why I'm a little disappointed in myself for not owning more horror movies, because sound design is way more important than visuals with horror movies.
Yes.
Just because it really, even just being silent or the lack of sound design is still part of the sound design, in a way. So I do. So in the comments below, if, maybe drop some recommendations for horror movies that are must own. Because I need to own more.
There's actually a scene I was thinking, and then we'll move on to talking about the home theater stuff. It's all home theater related though, right? I mean, come on. There's the two It movies, the It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2. There's actually right in the opening, there's a scene, or the Warner Brothers logo pops up, and you actually hear this little kid singing, and it's going all throughout the room, above you, around you. There's lightning and thunder going off too. And that's really cool. But there's a scene near the end of the second film, so spoiler if no one's seen it, where one of the characters gets caught up in Pennywise's deadlights. And that's a great scene, just as envelopment goes and immersiveness, but to really test out your subwoofers, because I think it goes, I can't remember where I read it. It goes down to something like 12 hertz or 13 hertz or something like that. So if you have a capable system, or like me, I actually have two subs in the front of the room and then two near field subs right behind me, behind the seats. So I feel, kind of those really low notes, and it really adds to that kind of immersion. But I would definitely recommend those as well. So super awesome. Sorry to put you on the spot there, Ethan. So someone actually, I want to go over a couple comments real quick. So someone said, every time he calls Elon Ethan, everyone take a shot. So please don't do that. I don't want to be responsible for anyone's like cirrhosis of the liver or liver failure or whatever. So, and then we'll go over a couple of comments real quick that I'm finding here. Actually, just one. This person actually called you Egan. So Egan.
Hey.
So Elon.
It's Elon and Egan. They're both Gaelic or Celtic, whatever you want to call it. So sure, yeah, I'll go with that too.
So he asked, Elon, you've been doing a lot of what's the best configuration videos? I think you tested a 5.1.5 Oro setup a few months ago. Do you like that versus your Decree?
Kind of. Honestly, I didn't get enough experience with the voice of God, or at least I didn't find it as immersive as I thought it was going to be. So I definitely have to kind of revisit that now that I have dived in deeper to 7.1.2 versus 5.1.4. Yeah. I mean, I know I have my heights. Everything is based on RO3D specifications.
Yeah.
But I'm still running everything just, Dolby Atmos and DTSX, whatever.
Yeah.
Because right now I have my IOTA AVX17 hooked up, and that does not have RO3D. So there's that limitation. Because it seems like every time I plug in my Marantz SR7015, I don't know. Now that I've had this IOTA AVX17 for a few months now, every time I go back and plug in my Marantz, it's like, all right.
You're missing it. You're missing it a little bit.
Yeah, there's just something missing that the IOTA can just put out that I really like, that I enjoy just a little bit more than the Marantz. So I don't know if I'll be itching to hook that Marantz up anytime soon.
Yeah. And he actually did correct your name here moments later. I didn't see that until just now. So H2O FSU. Sorry, I was, but I will kind of attest to being kind of you experience something new with like an item that you're reviewing or that you're checking out, or maybe you just bought it but you're thinking, oh, did I make the right decision? And then you realize, well, let me just hook my old thing back up. Mm-hmm. And then you go, oh, you know what? I can't live without this. I really don't want to go back. So I think that's something that I find myself doing a lot, where I'm currently reviewing some Atmos speakers, in-ceiling Atmos speakers from Aperion Audio that are angled. And I was using the Polk VT60s before, which are just downfiring. They have an aimable tweeter, but you can't actually, the woofer itself is just downfiring. And with the angled woofer, I'm hearing a ton more stuff coming at me since they're aimed properly. Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't get that before. Like suddenly they're in the same position as the Polks, but having that angle and having them aimed at you makes a massive difference. And I don't know. I just didn't even think or realize that. So that's super, like, that's something that I'm like, I don't really want to like get rid of these now. Like, I'm like, can I just sell the Polks and buy the Aperion Audio ones? So that's probably what I will do. So we'll answer one more.
Same size, the Polk and the
Aperion? So they're both 6.5-inch woofers. Okay. What's funny is I had already put the Polks in, and we could talk about this a little later too when we're talking about like all the build stuff. But I put the Polks in, so I had the cutout already and the drop ceiling panels for them, and I was so worried that the Aperion Audio, the clearest 6Cs, wouldn't fit.
Right.
But luckily, it was in like 1 or 2 millimeters size difference.
Oh wow!
And the hole slightly too big for these, but like the dog ears still like were able to go in with a little like they don't have as much like clearance for the thickness. Yeah. But I was able to make them work, and they're super secure, and they look super, super awesome in there. Like I'm just like, oh, like I'm gonna want to keep these. So I really yeah, Atmos, like, and you've done many videos on like different configurations, and I think you've done a few videos on placement as well. And like all that stuff does make can make a massive difference in terms of like your overall impression of Atmos, right? Like
Mhm.
it, if you don't set it up right, if you're going by the Dolby diagram and they're putting them right in line with the mains, they're not gonna, like, they're gonna smear a lot with the main speakers, the bed layer, and you're not gonna get as much like separation, especially if you're like me. I'm only running 2 right now.
Yeah.
So again, we could talk about this stuff all day, right? Like
We could.
it's we could and we did for 2 hours last night. We were running the gamut through everything. I think we talked about home theater maybe 15-20 minutes last night. Everything else was about film scores. And
Yeah.
I think it was I had told my wife that when we started quoting Jiminy Glick, I was like, I think I found my long lost brother. Like, I think I'm somehow related to this guy, because like we have a lot of the same things like in our brain. It's crazy.
We do. We do.
So
Although I will say, for those watching and all the millions of people watching right now, um, as far as in ceiling speakers, I guess the one advantage to having ceiling speakers that just shoot straight down and aren't angled or whatever is, I guess, if you have like multiple rows of seats. So that
right.
way maybe, more than one row can actually hear something or whatever. Otherwise, it is always best practice to somehow, if at all possible, point those speakers at your listening position.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, when you start adding rows, the complexity level, in my opinion, goes up,
yeah.
because now you're trying to make 6 seats, like 3 here, 3 behind, or like maybe more.
Mhm.
You really need to kind of factor that in. That's one of the few times, or not one of the few times, I would definitely like consult a professional designer at least to go, oh, how can I do, like, what's the best way to go about this?
Mhm.
And yeah, it's awesome. Oh, Kevin, man, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you so much. It all goes to me. Elon gets none of it. Here's my down payment for my speakers, Brad. But thank you so much, Kevin. Just so everyone knows, super chats are live, available, whatever, not required whatsoever. We're going to go through as many questions as we possibly can throughout the stream and at the end. So yeah, just don't think that you have to, provide like money in order to get your comment seen. I had a comment like that in a video once, and it just kind of, I was like, no, like we're just gonna answer stuff, but it's much appreciated. Thanks for showing your support. And Kevin, you are awesome, and you are the man.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. So we're gonna kind of dive into some other things. If you're asking questions or whatever, again, put a Q in the front, and I will mark it so we can see it as we get to more have a little, maybe in between, we'll answer some questions or whatever. So what I want to ask Elon about his home theater build. And so this is actually probably going to be a lot of me just asking you stuff because I think people may have, seen my build stuff and go, oh, well, he's already done all this. So yeah, I mean, if you've seen my stuff, you know, but I was going to ask you, what was the single reason, what was the main purpose of converting this grow shed into kind of a dedicated space? I'd already know the answer, but let people out there know,
Sure. I mean, honestly, it was up until moving. Well, for those of you who don't know, I'm currently living at my brother-in-law's house while our new construction home is being finished, which hopefully will be finished by Thanksgiving. So I'm very excited about that because we've been living in my brother-in-law's house, which is a pretty small house for me and my wife and my 2 daughters. We've been living in here since January of 2022. So we definitely didn't think we were going to be living here this long. But I mean, it's fortunate enough that we even have this particular space, that it belongs to my brother-in-law. So we're very fortunate in that regard. But up until moving here, I had never had a dedicated home theater space. I knew I wanted a dedicated home theater space at some point in my life. It's just always been a goal of mine. So then when I saw that this grow shed was here, and it was very large. I mean, the dimensions of this theater are 11 feet by 16 feet by 9 feet. Um, but like there's still, maybe 500 square feet left in this grow shed for whatever. Well, right now it's all of our crap that's in here for storage until we move, and then we're going to move all of it out and put it in our new house. So once all this stuff is out, then I got tons of room because I have plenty of boxes of speakers and other things from various companies sending me things and stuff that I need to review and haven't gotten around to yet. So I just knew that I wanted to have that space, not only just to have a dedicated home theater space, because I never actually heard that type of space before, other than going to the actual movie theater or cinema. And I wanted a space that I could easily swap components in and out of, swap speakers in and out of. That's why I also built movable acoustic panels, so that if I do change up any configurations, I could also move the acoustic panels to accommodate for that. But probably the most important thing is what Brad and I talked about last night, the wife factor. Because in our previous home, like a lot of people on YouTube right now, at least in the home theater sector, I, like many others, got really serious about YouTube during the pandemic in 2020, because I got laid off from my job as in the marketing department of a real estate agency. So then I just figured, well, I've got all this time. I really wanted to make a YouTube channel for quite some time, so let's do it. Let's go for it. So then once companies started sending me stuff, and I'm having to review all these things, change things around, snake wires all over the place. This was all happening in our living room in our previous home. And, my wife just kind of went in stride with it, and she was very supportive of it. But at the same time, I could just tell that it was really getting on her nerves because, 1 week it's a sound bar, and the next week it's powered speakers, and the next week it's a full 7.1.4 setup with speaker wires running all over the place and are tripping all over everything. So I knew that once we moved out of this house, that I would definitely need some sort of dedicated playroom to review things and swap things in and out, and just have the space all to myself. And also kids. I mean, my daughters are, they're pretty cautious and aware of expensive things, but at the same time, they're still kids. They're 8 and 6 right now.
Right.
So no matter what, they're probably going to end up damaging or, maybe knocking something over eventually. So I wanted that to also be just far away from them as possible.
Yeah.
So
what is it about kids that sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I've always noticed kids have this knack of, like, if they see like a exposed tweeter, they just want to
Yeah.
push the center. Why is that? It's like I've seen stuff like that. I'm like, oh gosh, it's like it hurts me inside,
Right.
And I do want to give a shout out real quick to a very special guest that's in the comments right now. My wife has joined us for a brief moment, and she is an outlier. Well, I can't even talk. So she's an outlier. She doesn't think she's normal, and I will honestly agree with her. She has been more than gracious and patient with me, especially in our other house that we were renting, with me just like taking over the living room, right, and just converting that into a theater room, and having all of this stuff like coming in for review. And I was just like, oh, and she was actually, it really surprised me. And I knew I married the right woman right? When I was talking to her one time, and she's like, I think we need a bigger TV in here. I was like, I love you. Thank you so much, Trish. So yeah, I think at that time we had like a 65-inch TV, and we're like, yeah, we need a bigger TV. So yeah, so it was great. But yeah, and she was just very patient. There was a lot of times where I was like testing out subwoofers. She got so sick of the opening race scene, Ready Player One. It's playing that on a loop. And as I mentioned to you, Elon, last night, I had the subwoofer, like one of the subwoofers right next to our bedroom, and it would just rattle the door. Like bought some weather stripping off of Amazon, and that fixed that. And so she was happy because like I would be watching something and you just hear this like you could hear the door vibrate. It was so funny.
Yeah, I mean, luckily we didn't. It was never like a huge point of contention between my wife and I.
Yeah.
We never like gotten any arguments about it. I could just, you just have that sixth sense about your wife, and it was just definitely getting to her by the time we were about to move out of that house. So I am glad that I now have my own little shop that I can mess around in.
Yeah, and so like you had mentioned that last night, that one of the biggest reasons was to have something separate that you're not bothering your wife and kids with. Your wife mainly, because she's the one that kind of has to deal with the aftermath of you getting speakers in and having to install these or do this, and there's wires running everywhere, and you don't really have you maybe sometimes don't have a functional living space, right?
Yeah.
That people come in and they're like, where's all the, like, what's going on? So it's definitely like convenient having a dedicated space. And I don't know if you're somewhat like me in that you get things set up a certain way, and then you get something in for review, and you kind of like begrudgingly have to undo all the stuff you just did. Like so like I'll every time I get subwoofers in for review, I always like to run through mini DSP and do all this stuff. It's like, okay, well now at least with that I could just put my old subs back in and reload like an old profile if I remember to save it. That's that is something that I've been guilty of not doing for a while. So but let's I was going to ask you a little bit about your process and like how you went about kind of planning the whole thing. Like you knew you had this, right? This grow shed that you wanted to convert. But like where does one start in like kind of we'll call it the pre-production phase, since we're both like kind of film nerds. So like the pre-production phase of like, okay, where do we even begin with all of this?
I mean, yeah, it was just me and a piece of paper and a pencil, and because I obviously I wanted to make it wider than 11 feet initially, but in the grow shed itself, the door that you walk in, it's about 11 feet 6 inches from one of the walls.
Yeah.
So I knew I wouldn't be able to get it like 12 feet, because then it would, the door is right there. But at the same time, in the cement, in the concrete, there was this line, a line dividing just sections of concrete, right? And it was basically at almost exactly 11 feet. So then I wouldn't have to kind of guess where I'm going to put a particular line or like draw a line. So I knew, okay, I'm going to make it as wide as this line that goes through the concrete. And then I'm going to have it go about 16 feet that way. Initially, because I read the best type of cuboid or trapezoid for a home theater is called like the golden ratio or the golden cube or something like that, where it's not only a rectangle, but the ceiling, from the back of the ceiling to the front of the room, kind of goes at a slight downward angle.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do that, but then that would have, I don't know, that probably would have been a lot harder to do to actually get a sloping ceiling. And I'm not like, I'm pretty handy, but I'm not that handy.
Yeah,
So
yeah. We talked about that last night, where we're like, I don't know what I'm doing most of the time, but I feel like,
yeah,
I got a good grasp on the concepts, and yeah,
right. So if I had to do it all over again, or at least on our new property where the new house is being built, we've got plenty of land to eventually have another outbuilding out there
hmm
because we want to have eventually some sort of like in-law suite or
yeah,
in-law
of course,
quarters, just for guests or whoever may roll through. So I wanted to make that a in-law suite slash home theater, like my dream home theater, where I can really plan it out, make it look nice instead of, this piece of crap drywall that I did. Actually have some professionals come in and do it. And at
yeah,
that point, then I would also have it be a downward sloping ceiling.
right,
Um, so that's one thing I wish I could have done in this one, but it is what it is, whatever.
yeah,
So that was part of the initial plans, but then I scrapped that. But then I knew that I didn't want to connect and disconnect a bunch of speaker wire over and over, or at least have to bring speaker wire out of the wall at any point.
yeah.
So then I made it a point to uh, have wall plates, speaker wall plates,
Oh yeah, yeah,
put into the walls and the ceiling next to where the speakers would eventually go. So then I have a giant wall plate that has many speaker terminals behind uh, behind everything. So that's on the front wall. So it's got, front left, front right, heights, whatever. All of that kind of terminates in that big wall plate behind everything.
yeah,
And then those then snake out to the various other wall plates that I have placed around the theater. So that way I could then just run a short speaker wire cable from the wall plate to the actual speaker.
right.
So that has actually proved to be really cool, really advantageous, and it's helped out a lot. It's made things go a lot more smoothly when I need to change things around.
Yeah, I think
Um,
also it's much like it's a kind of a cleaner solution,
yeah, I
like
think so.
overall, and it does make the room look a lot like, I mean, when you have a wall plate like basically like near the floor, like a with a bunch of connections on it, and it's like all like stuff's going into it, right?
Mhm.
It just, I don't, that stuff like that always looks cool to me, and hearing you say that was actually kind of brought me back to like my original plan to do something similar in my theater room. But then like once I got in, I realized how much work it would be to actually route cables through like the studs in the wall and
Yeah,
open up the drywall to do this. And it's like, okay, I don't have neither the time nor the experience nor the effort to do all of this stuff, right? Like
right.
I'm like, okay, I can hide most of the wires in the drop ceiling.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'll use that to my advantage, and then I'll just use cable channels coming out of that.
Mhm.
It's all like relative, right? Like when you're planning, it, for me, I'm always like, okay, dream big and then bring it back down to reality. So you're like, I
Mhm.
want to do all this, but realistically, I can't. I don't have either the funds or the time or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
so you have to make those compromises and kind of sacrifices here and there when you can. But
Right.
yeah,
Because I knew I was fortunate enough to be in the situation where I would have exposed walls before I put the drywall up. So that's why I had the idea, okay, well then that's why I'm going to do some wall plates, just because it was much easier to drill all the holes along the way because they were totally exposed. I didn't have to take down drywall. I didn't have to take down insulation. So then I could just go, you know, speaker by speaker and just kind of place them snake the speaker wire through and put the wall plates where they needed to go.
Jealous, man. So jealous.
Yeah.
But it's that thing where you watch someone else do something, even though like I've done similar things that you have. I mean, again, not like room construction, but it's like, oh man, like I should have thought of that. I wanted to do like or like I wish I had that flexibility to do that where like the you know the studs or the joists were exposed where I was able to route things through there. But then in the end, it's like, okay, we like that's what you did. Here's what I had to do to get it to work, and you end up being like really happy with the results. So, and are you happy with the results? That's the $1 million question right there. Like obviously there are things that you would change about it, but do you look back kind of like in disdain of what you did, or are you like, actually, I'm really proud of what I did?
Yeah, I am proud of what I did. It was definitely very hard because obviously I had never built a home theater before. So this was my first go around, and every time you do something for the first time, you're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way. So I did learn a lot, and it's not perfect, but it is perfect enough to do exactly what I want it to do. And that was my whole intention. And it is, I mean, I guess I could definitely address the rat's nest that is the whole cable situation behind all of my components right now. I could, at least clean that up a bit. That's probably my next big project in here.
Yeah.
But at least for the time being, I mean, it's awesome. Once I got the IOTA AVX17, it was like I was in a theater, and I had never experienced that before, besides going to the actual movie theaters.
Yeah.
So it was, it made me giddy when I finally experienced that somewhere beyond just the movie theater.
Yeah. When you have moments that either match or exceed what you've experienced in an actual theater, you're like, okay, like I'm kind of where I want to be right now. Like this has been my goal. I remember the first time I ever saw a movie in IMAX, and it was Tron Legacy, my first ever IMAX movie. So if you've seen that, if anybody in the watching the live stream, which we have about 26 to 30 people kind of all the time here, so that's really really cool. So if you're just joining, welcome. But I remember seeing that and going, wow, like I'll never be able to get that level of immersion and performance out of my home theater. And now I actually feel like I'm at a place where it's better in many ways than an IMAX, because one, I'm not having to pay a crazy amount of money to go see a movie, but just learning a bunch of different things throughout this whole process of building out a dedicated room with acoustic treatments. That was like the biggest thing for me. And I remember watching your video where you did a like before and after tests where you're like clapping and talking in the room. I just did the same thing for this last video. And what's funny is, my room is a lot smaller than yours. It's like 12 by 11 or something like that. So it's kind of a square. It has angled corners in the front of the room.
Yeah.
But like like when I took the acoustic panels out, I was like, I can hear the difference night and day to my ears. I recorded it and I'm like, okay, I can hear the difference, but it's just not anywhere near as pronounced as it is to my own ears. And it might be something similar to you where you're like, it sounded like this, but on the video itself, but like when you're here, it's a completely like different experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So have you done any, I don't know if you dabble a lot into like room EQ or anything. Have you done any like measurements of like what the room decay is before and after? Like what the echo, how that changes?
I unfortunately didn't get around to that because during the build, when I was setting up the electrical, because I had never done electrical before. I mean, I had changed out outlets before, and that's, pretty self-explanatory and pretty easy. But I had never run electrical wire before or dealt with an electrical panel to that extent before. So that was all new to me. But by the time that I actually got the electricity up and running, I had already put the carpet tiles down. I had already, it was just a little bit too late to really get an accurate before and after.
Yeah.
Just because in my final build video, I mentioned that when I did try to get some measurements and run REW, that I was getting some electricity coming through the interface and through the speaker that I was going to play the sine waves through. So that is what prompted me to really get an actual electrician to check out what I did wrong. So yeah, once I got the electricity actually functioning properly, then I just totally forgot to redo REW. And
Yeah. Yeah. I really like what you did with the stands on the acoustic panels themselves. So you could kind of move those around. And I can't remember, did you do all of them that way? Did you put stands on every single one?
All the ones that are on the floor, yeah.
Okay. So you have the cloud
I've got
panels above you. Yeah.
3 up here and then one behind me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So did you find like mounting those to the ceiling was a pain in the butt, or was it just kind of like, it worked, it's fine?
Yeah, I mean, it was luckily I just kind of off the seat of my pants kind of engineered it in my head how I would think they would go. Because originally I wanted to just do some, like, just have some chains coming down from the ceiling and then some screws with eyelets. So then I could just screw those eyelets into the panels and just have them hang. But then when I attempted to screw some screws into the panels, they're just so brittle because they're MDF.
Yeah.
Since they were so brittle, I was like, oh man, no, I can't screw anything into these, because after a while, especially with, subwoofers shaking the walls and stuff,
Right. And then gravity working its magic.
They'll eventually fall on me, and that's not going to be cool.
Not going to be good.
Yeah. So then I just came up with this idea, well, what if I just got a bunch of little, oh gosh, what do you even call them?
They were the clamps, right? Yeah, and you hung those. That's right. And I'm remembering that now.
Clamps, and then got little chains that hooked to the clamps, and then put those in the ceiling, and just screwed those in the ceiling. So,
and it works.
Yeah, luckily they're going strong and have been since day one. So
I think spray painting it black helped. You know, so it kind of blends in, and that's, man, spray paint is not talked about enough. I know. Like I originally wanted to just use the same black paint that I use for the doors and the trim on like all of the little cable channels. But I was like, I mean, matte black paint's going to probably look the same in a dark room anyway. Like you're not going to be able to tell. So I think that that's like one thing that I didn't even think about. But, it's also way cheaper. I thought you were going to grab a can of spray paint that you just had sitting off to that would have been perfect, but nope. It's a Wizarding World of Harry Potter.
Slytherin. Although when I took the test online, it said I was Hufflepuff. So whatever that means.
Those tests are no. So yeah, that's so before we move on, there's a couple of comments. We were talking about acoustic panels. I want to highlight those. I've marked all the comments for anyone watching. I've marked all the comments, and we're going to answer those in just a few minutes here. But Reed Botright asks, Elin, thanks for the great work building your room and passing on your knowledge of room treatments. I've got it saved for when I'm ready for the same. So, yes. Yeah. Ethan, dang it. Elin's, that one, Justin said it in the beginning and now it's stuck in my head. No, Elin actually did great work. I remember when I made my acoustic panels, which I'll actually be doing a eventual how-to video on, because it's actually super simple to make, like just a basic frame, put some insulation and stuff and cover them up. with fabric. It's super simple, but there's some things that, may need to be explained a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I found that they're super easy. So, but I would use your video and then like a couple others that I found to kind of, figure out how to make my own. And I just kind of went off and did it and hope for the best. Then they turned out pretty good.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, how did those ones that you put in the drop ceiling, how are those working out?
I mean, you're asking me a question? Oh my goodness. No, they're really great. So I actually talk about something in my video though, spoiler alert, in the very last build video, is that I wish I would have measured twice before I made them because I made them too big. And then secondly, get higher quality wood that is not like prone to warping like right off the pallet. So I basically used really cheap furring strips from like Home Depot or Lowe's. I mean, the ones for the ceiling panels were, I think, about $250 for each 1x3x8s.
Oh yeah.
So I needed like 3 or 4 of them to make all of those.
Right.
But had I gone with a higher quality wood, I wouldn't have to deal with warping. And so what happens is, and I noticed this on the actual acoustic panels too, because I used 1x4x8s on those, but the same furring strips, is that as straight as they look, once I like had everything cut and put together, I double checked my angles to make sure it wasn't me that made this error. But like if I laid like the frames flat on the floor, like one side would be like this and the other side would be like higher up. So it's not so much where it's like, it looks like it's been like twisted or something, but it's just slight enough that, especially with the ones on the panels on the wall, if you were to look, you could see that there's like a noticeable like kind of twist to it. Maybe like it might even be something like a 3 to 5 degree twist. That's noticeable, but honestly, they work. For the ones in the ceiling, though, I actually had to nail in a couple of the corners to get them from not being level in the drop ceiling.
Yeah.
And like that's just kind of a pain as I start like experimenting with more speakers and placement and things like that. Removing those or moving them into another location becomes a little difficult because now I got to go grab the pliers. I got to take out the nails, and I got to remember which one I put nails in, and I have to remove all the panels around them to get to them. So it's a little it's a little difficult, but they work out. They do work super well. It's just removing them to try to take measurements is like darn near impossible. Like I don't think that I would do the before and after measurements I've done, I left those in the ceiling because that's just way too much. I didn't think to do like before measurements before I put them in the ceiling. Yeah. So, that's on me. But one more comment here. Oh, we got a super chat. Let's see who. Oh, it's my friends over at the Fun Waste of Time. This is Taurus. He's joining us from the Fun Waste of Time podcast. It's a monthly podcast I do with those guys. He actually made a great little jingle for me when I go on my rants and tirades in the show, and can't wait to use that in maybe the next podcast. But so he actually asked a question, posted a comment. So Taurus, again, thank you so much for the super chat. I lost my train of thought there for 5 seconds. I was like, should I have used his real name? But it's public. He puts the podcast out with that name. So, but no, he says, hey, fellas, awesome live stream, Brad. Now that you've got your theater finished and your speakers and subs dialed in, what game are you looking forward to experiencing in the new space? This is actually a really good question because him and I kind of go back and forth. Like there hasn't been a lot in the gaming space for a little while. Like it's just kind of, we're in this kind of dry spell. Really, really excited for God of War Ragnarok. That's like my next.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the first God of War. The audio on that one. I mean, I love good looking visuals. I'm so glad that we're getting a game that has a ton of different frame rate options instead of just one and done. But the audio on the first one, I remember playing that, and this was at the time I only had 2 subs. But when the World Serpent spoke, it like I could feel it and it kind of like creeped me out a little bit. So I'm like hoping that there's something similar to the next one, or in the next one. And then after that, I mean, I'm really kind of more interested as I see more of the Callisto Protocol, which is kind of like the spiritual successor to Dead Space. So that's like, those are the games I'm really looking forward to. Oh, and High on Life that's coming out in December. That one looks kind of interesting. So
isn't there a new Modern Warfare like Call of
that
Duty
just
coming out too?
that just dropped.
Oh,
Like it just
okay.
came out a couple days ago. I'm not the biggest Call of Duty fan. It's hard for me to justify spending $70 on basically a story mode because I don't play multiplayer. I'll do co-op, but like multiplayer, I just don't have time to sit and like try to get good. You know, I'm always a noob in every game.
Right.
So I'd rather, you know, I enjoy single player games and co-op games, and it's just hard to spend $70 on to just play like a 4 to 5 hour or you know, slightly longer single player experience, and then like you're done. It's like,
Right.
you know, but if a lot of people come out and say, "Oh my gosh, the native Atmos mix on the Series X is amazing," that's kind of like digging that knife in. It's like, maybe I should get it. I don't know. You know,
Yeah.
will it be a waste of money? But yeah, I'll probably check that out at some point. But yeah, I'm hearing great things from people about it. So I don't know. We'll see. But thank you, Taurus, again for the super chat. Really appreciate it, buddy. We'll go back here real quick. I had something from Everyday Jay. He says he's in the process of building out my YouTube studio man cave theater, and I am debating on what type of panels to make. And I personally, for me, he had another comment that basically says, I don't know if I should use Safe and Sound or the Corning R15s. I use the Rockwool Safe and Sound. They're the 16 by 48 inch bats. They come in a pack of 12. I will say, if you have a Lowe's and Home Depot around you, check both. My the Lowe's closest to me didn't have them, but the one slightly further away did, and they were $10 or $15 cheaper at Lowe's than they were at Home Depot. So that's something I wish I would have when I bought it. I was like, dang, like I wish I would have actually made the extra trip over to the other Lowe's to get it. But I would recommend that. It's worked out really well. With that stuff, I did find that I wanted to put like weed blocker fabric on both the back and the front to just kind of contain any stray bits and pieces that may come out, you know, after doing a lot of research and stuff about it, you know, possibly being carcinogenic and, you know, hazardous to your health. I was like, I don't want any type of airborne fibers in the room from these. So I made sure to kind of go the extra effort. And then I just went to Joann's to get the fabric.
Yeah, me too.
And like I said, I would highly recommend buying higher quality wood than just like the basic ones, unless you just want to do it and you don't really care if they look kind of warped. You can save some money that way. But in the future, I would definitely, like, if I had to do that over again, I would maybe take less money out of the fabric budget, because I kind of overspent on fabric because I was like, I want it to look nice, and put that money towards, you know, higher quality wood, and maybe go with just a basic like black fabric that's not textured, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do there for that. But
I
any
mean,
other
you could even do, like, if you have access to a table saw, you could even cut down strips of plywood.
That's
If I had to do it all over again, I would probably do plywood just because it's a lot more rigid than MDF. And then I could just cut them down to whatever size and length that I need to, just because I have access to a table saw. So I'm fortunate in that regard. But yeah, if I had to do it all over again, I would definitely cut strips of plywood. Because I mean, MDF, I chose MDF because a lot of speaker cabinets are made from MDF. So I was like, hey, speakers, acoustic panels, MDF, MDF. But it just is kind of hard to work with, just because it's so granular, and dust. It's even worse than sawdust, you know, because it's so much more fine, and it can get into your, you know, nasal passages that much easier. But as far as the acoustic panels are concerned, just whatever you end up getting, just remember to make sure to have that gap between the acoustic panel and the wall, either to somehow set it up to sit on the wall or be attached to the wall,
Right.
or like I did, make some sort of stands to keep them, separate from the wall,
Yeah.
because that's really the most important thing.
Yeah, I would definitely say make sure that when you make them, like when I made mine, I factored in that okay, the thickness of the wood, or not the thickness, but the width of the panel is 4 inches. The bats are 3, so that's an inch of clearance. So I made sure that they were 2 inches off the wall. So I
Mhm.
kind of match the thickness of the insulation bat to the wall,
Right.
and that's just gonna like make your acoustic panels far more effective than if you were to just mount them flush against the wall. So
Yeah.
that's something that and depending on the room size, like I could go out a little further, and
Mhm.
it may be recommended to go out a little further, but like my room is too small. I was already kind of like, I'm like, okay, 3 inches off the wall and like basically 6 inches into the room is about the max that I can do,
Yeah.
without like always like bumping into one or something, you
Mhm.
know. But
Because it's a little misleading with a lot of acoustic panel um, companies out there, because that's what they'll show you in their promo photos or whatever, is that they're flush against the wall, which is great if you're like, say, if you just need to acoustically treat a room that you're just going to be talking in. Like,
yeah,
say if it is a YouTube studio and it's just your voice that you're trying to reduce the reflections of.
yeah,
If it's flush against the wall, then sure, it is going to be effective. But when you're dealing with a home theater, that's why it's really important to have that gap, that air gap between the acoustic panel and the wall, because you're not just dealing with the frequencies of your voice, you're dealing with super low frequencies and super high frequencies, the whole gamut. So that's why you definitely need to have that gap. But if it's just a YouTube studio where you're just talking at a camera,
yeah.
then sure, yeah, you can drape some acoustic panels on the wall and on the ceiling, and you should be fine.
Yeah, I think there's a common misconception sometimes, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about this and then answer some questions. We've been streaming for about an hour now, so we're
Woo!
gonna kind of wrap things up and answer a bunch of questions. So if you have any right now, throw a Q in front of that question, a big capital Q, and then post your question. I'll start, and then we'll get to it after we kind of go over a little bit more about the acoustic panels. But what I was gonna say was. I think there's a common misconception that you treat a recording space the same way as you would treat a theater. And
Yeah.
I find that that is not the case, because if I'm doing this and I don't have really any room treatments in here, just a couple of curtains,
Mhm.
I want to deaden this sound as much as possible. That's why you
Mhm.
see like vocal recording booths are like these like small little, boxes where
Yeah.
there's no reverberation, because you don't want anything kind of contaminating the signal,
Right.
right? Contaminating what's coming in. Whereas like a theater or a theater room or even like a mixing studio, you still want some of those natural room reflections. You don't want to deaden the
Mhm.
space too much. And it's something I actually again talk about in this last video, in that looking at my REW measurements and the decay, it's like I've probably uh treated the room a bit too much, too aggressive. It doesn't
Mhm.
sound dead, like
Right.
you could still hold a conversation in there. It doesn't sound like a recording booth. There's still some natural echo, but I may want to look at maybe adding some diffusers instead in a few certain spots outside of just the acoustic panel. So
Right. Right.
I've found that like I've heard like in some a couple of like friends, like their theater rooms are like they've just put too much, like they'll cover the whole wall and this, or and it's like, okay, I
Yeah.
walk in, and it's like I don't want to stay long in here, because I'm like in an anechoic chamber, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
I'm like, this isn't comfortable, and then everything just sounds dead. And thankfully, even though my room, I found it's slightly overcorrected or overtreated,
Mhm.
it still sounds very detailed and very lively when it needs to, without just sounding dead.
Yeah.
Eh, and I think that it can come down to personal preference as well, a little bit
Right.
too. It's like, how dry do you want everything to sound, or do you want like all the echo removed? Because there's some echoes that you want to do or want to remove, and then
Mhm.
others that you may, you want to get rid of, like that ceiling bounce, right? Like that ceiling
Yep.
echo bounce mainly. Like, so if you
Right.
clap and you hear like kind of like a flutter echo, that's you definitely want to get rid of that. But maybe some of the room's natural reverberation you want to keep. So it's definitely like a balancing act, and I think having something like Room EQ Wizard has helped me like tremendously in figuring out, okay, what's the best subwoofer placement, but also I'm still learning about how to read like the RT60 decay stuff within REW. So I'm never, I always say in my videos, I'm not like an expert, I'm an enthusiast. So as I learn things, I want to share them with you. And if I get something wrong, I'm going to tell you, I'm not an expert. I may be saying this wrong. So, I don't know if I'm right, but here's what I'm seeing, and, who knows? So, I think that like, whenever I'm talking to someone and they're like, I want to buy new speakers because I'm just not happy with the ones that I have, I'm like, where are your, like, where is your room at, or what is your room? And do you have any type of like treatments, or, if they're in a big open space, or like their room has nothing, I'm like, you may want to consider just, grabbing some acoustic panels, or making your own. And you'd be surprised at like how much that can impact and improve your sound, especially for things like your center channel, which is like the most important speaker in your setup, right? Like that's where all the dialogue, 80% of a movie soundtrack, something like that, is coming through that. Yeah. So it's done amazing things for like the dialogue intelligibility, without anything changing other than just the room treatment. So, but yeah. You have anything else you want to add before we jump over to the questions?
I mean, it is a balancing act when it comes to acoustic treatment.
Yeah.
Because if you do over treat it, then you're going to make your receiver and your amps work too hard, just to try and get to the levels that you want. So yeah, you definitely still have to have some sort of natural reverberations that are still going to exist in your home theater space. So just to reiterate that.
How dare you? You basically told me I did everything wrong. Just no. Yeah, it's it is like that balancing act, like you say. And when you're just learning stuff, it's very acoustic treatments, and I say acoustic treatments because that kind of covers the whole spectrum. There's like absorption, diffusion, broadband, some bass traps, all this stuff. Right. It can be very daunting and confusing because there's a lot of there's some things that you can definitely get wrong about it, and you can make your sound worse in your room than if you weren't doing, like, if you had none, which is what you definitely don't want, right? And like what you said about like receivers is actually, is super accurate, because you're pushing, you might have to bump those speaker levels up to get better sound. What's funny though is like in because I think the size of my room helps, right? Like it's a smaller room, so like I'm finding I actually have to reduce the trim versus like when I was trying to fill that space in our other house, which was like a big 17 by 20 room. I'm finding I could reduce those and actually listen at slightly higher volume levels without it sounding fatiguing, because I'm not hearing all those like room reflections, especially in the high end. That's where all the fatigue comes from for me.
Right.
So definitely. But yeah, let's jump over to the questions here. I actually starred a couple that aren't questions just because, but we'll start with the age-old question: OLED TV or projector? I'll let you I have my opinions on this, but since you're the guest, I'll make you go first.
I mean, honestly, it's been a while since I've actually dealt with any projectors, so I'm sure the technology has improved since the last time I dealt with one, which was, gosh, I don't know, 2007, 2008, when I lived with a bunch of buddies and they had a projector. Because, the projector was nice, but at the same time, as we only used the projector for certain things because the bulbs in the projector cost so much. So we had a normal TV, but then for like big events, or like if we had, a party or something, or like a movie watching event or something, we would put on the projector. But But I mean, I've had an OLED TV for a few years now, and yeah, I mean, just the fact that it can work in a well lit living room and a dark theater well is just a testament to how amazing OLED TVs are. Because I know that's one of the big factors of dealing with projectors is they aren't exactly the brightest, especially if you're not going to be spending thousands upon thousands of dollars. So if you have the budget to get, top of the line laser 4K projector that can do, so many nits of brightness, then sure, yeah, you might want to go
Yeah.
with that. But I mean, otherwise, just the versatility and just the amazing stellar picture quality that you get with an OLED TV. I'm still team OLED, but I guess eventually in my dream theater, I'm most definitely going to have a projector.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just like the versatility of TVs for now.
Yeah, I mean, and you've echoed a lot of like my thoughts. Again, I go over this with a friend who's like he loves projectors, and and rightfully so. But I think like for gaming, especially if you're after currently right now,
Yeah.
like after 120 hertz, refresh rates at 4K, low input latency, all that kind of stuff, you
Mhm.
really can't. There's not many projectors on the market that are affordable that will do 4K 120 with really low input latency. And then
Yeah.
again, you have to factor in, okay, is my room light controlled? Is this a laser, like a short throw, like an ultra short throw or something?
Mhm.
You do sacrifice some things for that screen size, right? So it's always like kind of a compromise or trade off between screen size and like picture quality. Like a projector will never be able to get as bright as even like the lowest end OLED,
Mhm.
pretty much, in terms of like nit values. So like even though OLEDs, like I have a LG C1 and that, hits around 700 nits, like, peak brightness in like a 10% window. But like
Mhm.
it's helped by like it's an infinite black, um,
Yeah.
the self-emitting pixels and stuff that can turn themselves off. So that helps a ton. So honestly, it would be really hard for me to go back or like to say I just want to use a projector for everything because, like you
Yeah.
said, bulb life is a thing, and those can be expensive. Laser projectors are only rated to go to like something like 20 or 30,000 hours, right?
Yeah.
So that might be they're rated to go 20 or 30,000 hours before they hit half life brightness or half brightness.
Right.
So there's just so many options, and I feel like as technology advances, projectors are going to inch closer and closer to what TVs are capable of doing. But you still have to factor in like the screen and the material and the gain and every like so it
Mhm.
whereas like it it's it goes from like something being kind of simple, like okay, a TV, I turn it on, I might adjust some picture settings or like I might have it calibrated or calibrate it myself. But then like it's pretty much like, good to go. And that's what I enjoy. In a
Mhm.
perfect world, I would love to have like a TV, and then when I want to watch a movie or play a game on the projector, I have a screen that comes down in front of the TV,
Yeah. Right.
and then that way you have the best of both worlds.
Yep.
Because like I'm very much a person that's like I want to have all the options. Give me all the options, right?
Right.
All the time. So that would be the only way I would probably, unless I had just a dedicated theater room where I do nothing but like watch movies and play games in there occasionally, and then I have another room that has, it's like my gaming room that has it's maybe smaller, but it has like an OLED and stuff, and
Mhm.
still like a Dolby Atmos setup. That may be an option, but I think for most people that's kind of unrealistic having all of that stuff.
Right.
So if I could combine like a projector screen that comes down in front, I have a projector mounted in the back, I have the HDMI cable going to that. Best of both worlds.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
to me, if you were to ask, it's just really dependent on what your situation is.
Yep.
Are you trying to put a projector in a bright room? I would say OLED TV every day. If you're
Mhm.
in a light controlled room and you really only watch movies, I would say go with the projector.
Mhm.
You know,
Well,
or
yeah, if you are a gamer, definitely go OLED.
yeah, OLED. OLED is great. I will say some of these games coming out now are like 30, 40 frames per second. And OLED really really brings out how awful like that frame rate is sometimes because of all the judder and stuff, because of the instant pixel response.
Yeah.
So that could be something, but something to keep in mind. But I love my OLED. I wouldn't trade it for anything other than maybe like the LG G2, you know, the higher end, maybe an 83 inch or that 97 inch, you know, that's like 25 grand. That's insane. But let's go to another question here. So Justin asked, I always like to ask this: if you had to start completely over with no equipment, what would you do different and or purchase first? Man, this is actually a really good question, and it's something that I think about on occasion, but I normally get people like asking me, where do I even start? And I always say, like, it's kind of like such a broad question. Let's say you already have the display that you like, right? And we're just talking about speakers or whatever. If you don't have the budget to get like a full 5.1 system, or like you have the budget to get like kind of a cheaper one, versus like getting two really good speakers for your like front, left, and right, and then a receiver, I would say go with the 2-channel first, get the receiver, and then build from there over time. You know, I'm not a huge soundbar guy, so like that wouldn't even be somewhere where I would consider starting if you were. And not that soundbars are bad, they definitely have their uses in place. But like if you're trying to build out a theater, I don't think starting with a soundbar is necessarily the best place to start, unless you want something cheap and quick, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that down the road I'm going to want to add, you know, I want to upgrade things. So I would say start with 2 left and right speakers and maybe a sub, because that can be important, especially if you can only afford like bookshelves. Like I know the Emotiva B1s or the B1 Pluses are really, really popular. They sound really good. They're not super expensive. That'd be a great place to start. Get yourself a nice like 5.1.2 receiver for I think you just actually posted the Denon S760H is $399 at Costco right now, which is insane for what you get, right? I was texting a friend about that. It's like, dude, if you're on the fence about picking this up, because him and I have been talking about this specific receiver, I'm like, Costco's warranty and the return policy, you can't go wrong. Just grab it, test it out for yeah. So what would your response to that be to this question?
No, pretty much exactly the same. I would get an inexpensive receiver, 7-channel one, probably the S760H or the Onkyo 6050 at Costco. And then just start with 2 nice bookshelves. If you can afford it, try and get a little bit nicer bookshelves, like maybe some Klipsch RP series speakers. But otherwise, just some nice bookshelves. I mean, ELAC also sells some really nice bookshelves. Aperion Audio sells nice bookshelves. But definitely, if it's home theater that you're striving for, you have to get a subwoofer as well. So
exactly. Yeah.
You're going to need a 2.1 system.
Yeah.
So get a 7-channel so you can then expand later on, get some nice bookshelves, get a subwoofer, and then just over time get more speakers. Probably, a center channel is probably the next thing to get.
Yeah. I would say definitely if you start with bookshelves, know that like you'll probably eventually want to like maybe get towers for the front and move those bookshelves to your side surrounds.
Exactly.
You know, and upgrade. But yeah, I would definitely make the priority being, get a nice 2.1 system and then add that center channel, because that's going to most of the stuff comes from, like we've said earlier, 80% of a movie soundtrack comes through the center channel. That's like the most important speaker in a system.
Yeah.
Unless you're a bass head, and then maybe it's like, getting 12 subwoofers or something. But yeah, definitely. And then just upgrade from there. It's super, that's something I wish I would have done. And I saw a comment too that someone said, I wish I would have done like a nice 2.1 setup instead of buying like a crappy home theater in a box, Yeah. Which they have come a long way. I'll grant them that. But, if given the option to do over again, which was what the question was, yeah, I would definitely start there. And then, like I said, that's with assuming you have the display already, picked out. That's a whole other, that's a hard one, because I feel like speakers are a little more easy to go, okay, here's a really good place to start. Whereas like there's so many questions you have to ask yourself about what display type do you get and what, like what technology do you want to do it. Is this going in a bright room? Is it in the direct sunlight? Like all of that stuff can impact like your decision on what type of thing you get. So I already got some like maybe do some of these rapid fire because we're running a little. I don't want to like Elon has a place to be home with his wife and kids. So no, we'll do some of these rapid fire real quick. So Kevin asks, either of you planning to review the Emotiva MC1 processor?
I have been in contact with my Emotiva person, and it was just last week because ever since the MC1 came out, I've just every month or so, I just kind of come back with the same question, like, "Hey, is the MC1 available to send out for YouTubers like myself to review?" Just because they've been such limited stock with those because they've been very popular. Good for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last email that he sent me last week was finally somewhat promising, but not like
definite.
Definite. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he said he's trying to get some units, the paperwork all done and ready to be sent out to influencers to review. And he said, I am most likely on that short list. So
awesome. How much did you slide him a little money? Like, here you go, buddy.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Can this change your mind?
It can be really difficult to kind of and I found that with sometimes it's just these brands are so busy with a bunch of you just kind of have to constantly remind them, and you get moved up on the list. It's not about favoritism or anything. It's just they're so busy, and you have to think if they're sending all of this stuff out to all these different like YouTubers and content creators. I hate the word influencer, but but I mean that's kind of how they view it too. It's a lot. So there's like a laundry list, and typically they don't just have like unlimited stock to send out, right? They have like review samples or review units that are specifically there for that purpose, and they may have 30 of these, and if they're out there in the world already, well, now you got to wait until people start returning it, and sometimes people want to keep stuff and then they buy it or whatever. So that kind of makes everything a little more complicated. But I would definitely be open to it. I would also be open to like reviewing any other speakers because I've never actually heard them in person. I've heard them in like demo rooms and stuff, but to get their speakers in in your own house is a different story. So definitely there. Definitely I need to reach out to them again. It's been a while. Super busy.
I will. There we go. Okay.
So moving on. Mike Ortiz asked so my question pertains to EQ settings. I have a Denon S760H, just got the Odyssey app. How should my EQ settings look per speaker? Should they all look like the Harman curve or something else? I'll jump in with this first. You might have some insight on this, Elon. I use the app solely. I don't do much EQ above 500 hertz. I actually just curtain everything off at 500, and I don't let Odyssey do anything above that. I found just in my, it might look better on REW measurements, but to my ears, it sounds worse and slightly harsh. And that Odyssey tends to like overcorrect those things. And I've played around with actually going in and EQing those like massive like peaks that Odyssey just doesn't do anything with. And I'm like, I prefer the like how it sounds with a 500 hertz curtain on all my speakers. That's just my personal preference. I also completely disable the subwoofer correction because I use a mini DSP, but that is where you can add your house curve to that. I've read conflicting reports that you want all of your speakers to also have that house curve to kind of match, the Harman curve.
Yeah.
But in practice, I've found that it hasn't made a discernible difference to my ears, adding all that house curve. Plus, I mean, sometimes you're boosting that up 5-6 decibels. So you're especially in the lower octaves, you're asking your amp or your receiver to push out more power to those speakers, you know, in the lower registers, which do require a lot more power, you know, than like your high end stuff, like your you know, your high frequencies. So I didn't notice much of a difference. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to take the strain I'm putting on the amp and just run those like, you know, flat or whatever. In terms of Odyssey. So that's been my experience. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but that's just how I've done things, and it's worked out really well. Do you have any comments or?
I mean, I've kind of got the same conclusion as you, but I hearken back to my days when I went to audio engineering school, when we were working on mixing music, because a ton of the EQ adjustments that you're needing to make happen within about 200 to 700 hertz, because that's just where everything becomes so muddy, because so many instruments, bass, kick drum, snare, vocals, so many of those instruments and part of the arrangement are all working and running into each other, you know, and getting really jumbled up and sounding really muddy around 200 to 700 hertz. So that's definitely where I would also mess with some EQ if I needed to. But yeah, above that, then yeah, it can start to sound really bad.
Almost like artificial. Like you're not.
Yeah.
Like I've read that you're instead of EQing, because what you really want to do with room EQ or you know, room EQ, room correction basically is you want to EQ the room, but past a certain point, you're now EQing the speakers and not the room, right? So it like typically speakers need a lot of help in the bass region, like, you know, 500, 700 hertz below, sometimes 1,000. I've seen people say start at 1,000 and then work your way down and drop that curtain and see how you like it. And then when you find where it sounds the best to you in your room, because every room is different, like it's nothing's going to sound the same, you know, two setups in two different rooms, or like the same setup in two different rooms are going to sound completely different.
Yeah.
So, you know, start there and then back off until you find like where it sounds best to your ears. And you can also use REW to kind of look at measurements. But I used to be one of those people that really focus on like if it measures well, it's going to sound great. And then over time, you kind of learn, okay, yeah, no, even though it looks good on this graph, something sounds off.
Yeah.
You know, so that's just kind of something. Sometimes you got to use your ears and a combination. So like REW is always good to verify things.
True.
But at the end of the day, if you calibrate everything and like I got this flat graph and you listen to it and you're like, wow, like it sounds hollow or lifeless.
Right.
You know, okay, well, I got to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah,
But
it's
cool.
got to be a hybrid. You've got to use the measurements to help you,
Yep.
but you also got to use your own ears. Like it's just, you have to.
Yeah, and then the worst is when you know your wife comes in and she's like, I can't hear any difference. I don't know what you're talking about. You're like, all this work for nothing. But all right. So moving on, a couple of comments here. Elin, your video explaining IMAX enhanced content was very helpful.
You're welcome.
I agree. I actually made a video on that too when it first launched on Disney Plus, and you know, people were like, "What do you even get with this?" And I'm like, "That's here it is. Like you get a expanded aspect ratio, and that's pretty much it.
That's
like
about it for now.
the video quality is not going to be any better over the stream. It's going to look pretty much identical.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it does look good, especially
definitely
a 4K OLED screen.
Oh yeah,
it looks great.
I would still give the edge, though, personally, to a 4K Blu-ray if you're sitting close enough to tell the difference, and you're not like, you know, sometimes Disney Plus streams, even streams in general, can be you can see compression. So I don't like the fact that all of the Disney Plus IMAX enhanced stuff is not available on physical media.
Me too.
So you can't benefit from that expanded aspect ratio. If you like that stuff, you have to use the stream, and it's like, but I want the slightly higher quality on the disc. So
me too.
Kevin Gardner says, just sub to your channel. Elin, sorry so late. How dare you, Kevin? How dare you? You never subscribed to his channel before. No, I know he definitely appreciates it. And Elin, you actually just recently, didn't you hit 20,000? This was
Yeah,
a
a few months ago.
few months ago. That's awesome, man.
It's almost 23 now.
That's great. Once you hit those kind of milestones of like 10 and 20, it's like I stop counting the in between until I start getting close. Right.
Yeah,
So like
right.
right now I feel like I'm counting to 15. You know, I'm almost at like 1300 or 13,000. Wow, 1300. I just monetized. I remember when I was there though, man. We all started at the bottom, had to work our way up, and it's work. It is definitely work.
Yeah.
No doubt about that. Reed Botright asks, what about in ceilings that only point down like kefs? Are they a write-off, or does the concentric design compensate a bit for the lack of directionality? I'm not very familiar with kefs and their in-ceiling speakers. I can actually probably look them up real quick. Do you have any? No. I'm not kef in-ceiling. Let's.
I mean, like we mentioned earlier in the stream. I mean, downward shooting in-ceiling speakers, are effective to a certain degree.
Yeah, they get the job done. They can put sound into the room.
Them to point to your listening position.
Yeah, especially like I would say definitely for Atmos, but definitely if you're in a situation where you have to use in-ceiling speakers for your left, center, and right channels or like your surround, you definitely want to make sure not only are they placed correctly, but you get angled, like angled ones, because you're gonna lose a lot of sound. Like the dispersion, like the sound dispersion of in-ceiling speakers is still like basically straight down, but like kind of cone. They may go a little bit wider than normal speaker because they don't have like they're circular, so they're they don't have that vertical dispersion limitation. Am I saying that right, or is it horizontal? Right. Anyway, it's slightly different. Sure, right. It's slightly different for the circular speakers that are especially angled. So now you're taking that down firing and you're angling it, so now it's firing off at you. If it's angled properly, either to your ears, or I know one of the popular things to do is take the angle and use like a laser level or a laser guide and aim it at the opposite seat. So like you don't aim it at the one that's closest to it, you aim it at the opposite one over there, and then you do the same for the reverse, and that's supposed to like really get you like the best sound. That's what I've read.
So
I don't know, I might try
crossing,
it. Yeah, you cross the streams basically.
Right.
Cross the streams. Let me know in the comments if you get that quote. Well, moving on here. Are you able to physically fit those SVS subs into your room? Yes, I am. I think he's talking about the SVS PP3000s that I just got. I have to unbox them outside of the room and then slide them in on the packaging that's like they're contained in. So they will fit in the room that way. But the box itself will not fit in the room. I ran into the same issue with the Valencia seats. I had to unbox them outside of the room and then bring them in the doorway. So they're big boxes. I thought the PB2000 Pro boxes were big. I made a joke about that in my video where I was actually inside the box and just closed it up. This one I could live in much more comfortably. So I might end up buying these subwoofers just for that reason.
Hey, nice.
Right, exactly. Moving on, Kevin Gardner says a 32-channel wall plate would look like an old telephone switchboard. It can. And if you like that aesthetic, absolutely, why not? Go for it.
Please hold.
Yeah. While we direct your call, we would like to reach you regarding your car's extended warranty.
Oh, jeez.
Or Camp Lejeune water stuff. All right. So I got a few more questions here. Kevin actually asked, Elon, do you think the Iota VX is better than the Tone Winner or Emotiva MC1?
I don't know. Hopefully...
You're just leave. You're fired. How do you can't? No, I'm just kidding.
Like I said, that MC1 is hopefully coming fairly soon, so I can actually get a side-by-side comparison. But what I've been told is that the Tone Winner and the Iota are basically the same OEM components. So as far as I know, they're probably very similar. Run on different software. So I guess that's the only difference, but... for the most part, even though it's one of the less expensive preamps you can get, it has outperformed my Marantz SR7015. So that's saying something.
Wow. That's kind of a high order to like a high bar to beat,
Yeah.
So that's crazy.
Although this, I mean, the SR7015 and everything that came out in 2020 did have those HDMI 2.1 bugs. So I have experienced some video switching, or just all of a sudden the video just kind of cuts out and then comes back in. So I didn't like that with
Yeah.
the SR7015, but
Yeah.
as far as just pound for pound audio quality, yeah, the Iota is why it's currently hooked up.
Man, you think you're gonna keep it, or is that too much to ask on a live stream?
Well, I mean, they haven't requested it back yet, because I even asked them, like, I would hope to be able to do some comparisons
Yeah.
in the future. So is it okay if I hang on to this for a couple months? And the person at Iota was like, yeah, we have
Hang on to it.
no intention to request that back anytime soon. So have at
That's
it.
yeah. You always like hearing that, because then you're like, well, how long? Like if they say indefinitely,
Yeah.
well, that technically means forever, so it's mine.
Right.
No, it is kind of that funny thing where you're like, okay, I'll send these back anytime you guys want to get me a label, and then crickets. Like you don't hear anything, and you're like,
Right.
I guess I'm gonna keep this monitor, like or these speakers.
Yeah.
So cool. Yeah, it is hard to because I'll get questions about, oh, how is this sub compared to this sub? Well, I don't like making recommendations to people on things that I have not heard or had the chance to compare it to. So if I have heard a sub and then heard this sub, then that's a different story. But most of the time it's like, well, is this SVS better than this Rhythmic sub? It's like, okay, I know Rhythmic's a great brand, but I have not heard their stuff. So until I do, I can only say what I can say about the SVS. I'm not gonna be like, on paper this sub seems great, but I don't know. I haven't heard it, so definitely. Mike Jerome asked, is it normal for the Toslink flap to break off on the back of the AVR when taking out the Toslink cable?
I've had that happen.
Yeah.
It was actually maybe about a month ago on a particular component that I have, and that was the first time that I'd experienced that. But it still works. So there's just, I mean, I guess just over time, it's kind of inherent with the design, because it's just this weak little flap.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think it's a problem because it still works. But
yeah, and I think Toslink still has a place. I made a video early this year saying should you use optical cables in 2022, or why you should, or something like that, and I still use it. It solves a lot of issues. Yes, it's limited to Dolby Digital 5.1 or DTS 5.1, but or ES, like you can do like ES, or I forgot about all those old codecs ever since moving to True HD and stuff. But I think it still has its place, and especially if you're dealing with a lot of audio latency from like ARC or eARC, it can be a really simple solution to like getting non-delayed audio.
I'm gonna be right back.
Sure.
1 second.
No problem. Leaving the live stream before it's done. So yeah, like I said, optical can definitely, or Toslink, it's interchangeable. But I've found that even on the LG C1, you get some noticeable input latency, or not input latency, audio delay or latency when I have my Series X plugged directly, or PS5 plugged directly into the television, and then I go ARC out to the receiver. And I've played around with a bunch of different settings. I've disabled up mixing and all that stuff. Even with ARC, I still get an audio delay on it. Whereas if I plug in optical between the TV and the receiver, that the delay goes away completely. And it's like a thing where like you wouldn't think that it would make a big difference, but when you're dealing with the difference between like I think I measured it around, with HDMI I get about 110 milliseconds of audio delay, and then with optical I get about 30 milliseconds, so it's barely even noticeable. But like the difference between like 110 120 milliseconds and 30 is like, I mean, 100 milliseconds is 1 second. So you imagine you fire a gun, you hit the button on the controller, and then the sound plays like almost a second and a half later. You're going to notice that. And it definitely impacts many, many different games. So welcome back, Elon. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
No, we're wrapping it up here. We got looks like 4 questions here, or 3 questions actually. 2 maybe. I can't tell. Why did I mark all these? Reed says, Brad, I just tried your borrowed subdistance hack in REW. Still working through it, but things are starting to sound much better. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I actually just used that the other day to try to figure out. He's talking about basically using the tone generator and SPL meter within Room EQ Wizard to isolate the frequency where your crossover, like if you're crossing your speakers over, say at like 90 hertz, and you get like a slight dip or a null right there, you can actually use a subdistance to try to mitigate that by playing by finding that tone, playing it in the tone generator, and then measuring the SPL at the same time, and then adjusting your subdistance so you get a real-time SPL reading of that. That's a great way to do it, and I still do it that way. You can also, I've started using the RTA functionality in Room EQ Wizard along with full bandwidth pink noise to kind of do the same thing, but you get an actual readout of the frequency response. So you get, you can see, okay, I'm fixing this here, but I'm causing this issue down here in real time as you're changing the subdistance. So that's actually a really cool way to do it. I might do an updated video to kind of show you the settings, to show people the settings for that. Because I think that's useful too. The RTA stuff it can be very, Elon has a degree in audio engineering, right?
I wouldn't say a degree.
Okay, he has some schooling certificates. So he probably knows more about like reading an RTA and stuff than even I do. But the first time you look at it, you're like, what are all the 1/6 octave? You have to figure out a couple things, especially with Room EQ Wizard, because nothing is really told to you with that program. You have to kind of figure it out all yourself or watch a tutorial or something. So Reed also says, Elon, good point that room treatment actually makes your equipment go further. Too many people will jump to getting more amps or bigger speakers. And that's like exactly what we were talking about. That's something that I wish if you told 20-year-old me nearly 20 years ago that, oh yeah, it's not so much about the speakers, but more about like the room you're putting those speakers in. I would have said you're insane. But then, I was also 20 and kind of just like full of myself. Not really. I was never full. I was more like, oh, really? Okay. And then I would go home and research it and go, oh, man, they were right. So, yeah, we talked a lot about that in this stream. One more question here. When it comes to specs, would you pick Samsung or LG? Oh, this is kind of like, would you go Xbox or PlayStation?
Are they talking TVs?
If we're talking TVs, here's my stance on it, and I'll let you chime in too. I prefer LG only because Samsung's insistence on not supporting Dolby Vision. I feel like as a consumer, I want as many options as possible. I like HDR10 hasn't been, or HDR10 Plus hasn't been adopted widely enough for me to really see it as a major competitor to Dolby Vision. That's just how I view it. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. It's just my opinion. But I want something that will support all of the formats that I can throw at it. And I don't want, and I know that the C1 in particular doesn't support HDR10 Plus. But again, I don't really see like, there's not really a whole lot, in my opinion, out there that will, that can demo or showcase what HDR10 Plus is capable of.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, it's just
almost all like 4K Blu-rays, if they have some sort of color enhancement, it's 9 times out of 10 going to be Dolby Vision.
Yep. Some of them will actually have Dolby Vision and the HDR10 Plus metadata.
Yeah.
So it's like, but then you need a player that supports that. And I think far more Blu-ray players out there support Dolby Vision, unless it's a Samsung, than that support HDR10 Plus, especially if it's an older. I have an older LG player that only supports Dolby Vision and HDR10. And I mean, typically, will you notice a massive difference between the two anyway? Probably not. Like you're literally picking nits. I'm not even like that's an expression that people use, but it's so true. And what are your, like, do you have an opinion on this?
I mean, I actually haven't had a lot of experience with Samsung TVs, although we did just get the frame for our new house.
Oh,
So it's just sitting in a box right now until we
yeah.
can move in. So that'll be my first experience with a nice Samsung television. But I've experienced LG OLED and I love it. So I can only say yes to LG just because I remember going from a non-OLED TV to an OLED TV and just being blown away. I was like, well, it can't be that much of a difference. Yeah, it's that much of a difference. Just the blackness levels. It's just so trippy how uh, whenever there are black scenes or even the black bars, if you're watching something with black bars, how it looks like
Just
the TV
disappear.
is off.
It's there's been a few instances where I'll be watching something and it'll go to a black screen and did the TV just shut off?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
and you're like, whoa, like that is super cool. Now I love my LG C1. The one thing I will say is it absolutely 100% needed a calibration
Yeah.
because the black crush on it out of the box, especially right out of the box at 0 hours on the TV, was awful. Like to the point where like I think I had to raise the brightness up like 16 clicks to actually get detail in the shadow areas.
Oh, wow.
And then I've since like calibrated it with a CalMan and a colorimeter or colorimeter, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
And so I'll actually be doing videos about that because calibration has come a long way with them, with like the LG stuff, especially because they all use like AutoCal. And it's not perfect. You know, I'm not a professional calibrator, but it was able to get rid of the black crush like 90%, and then I was able to kind of tweak a few things further. But man, once I went to OLED, it's going to be really hard. I'm supposed to be getting something from Hisense in for review. I can't say what it is, but it might be hard kind of going back to that for a little bit while I'm reviewing that display.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it. Yeah, I'm kind of team OLED. But yeah, as far as like Samsung or LG, I would go LG mainly because of the whole Dolby Vision thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, it honestly does come down to personal preference too. I know with like the Samsung QD OLEDs, like their peak brightness is really great. I know that there was like some firmware issues with them, where they kind of screwed up some stuff. But yeah, I mean, honestly, we're kind of getting to a point where like all of these TVs are just like really, really good, especially from like the top dogs, right? You know, Sony, like, you know, I think like, you know, Sony makes great OLEDs too. They're less focused on gaming. Like if you're going gaming, it's definitely between Samsung and LG, and I would probably give the edge slightly to LG just because they've been making these OLEDs for a lot longer, and they kind of honed it in. And like their gaming performance is just insane. I mean, when you have a display with like less than 10 milliseconds of input latency, and it supports 4K 120 variable refresh rate and all this other stuff, dude, it's just hard to like pass up and deal with something else that might have potential issues because QD OLED tech is still fairly new, right? Like so it's hard to say. I don't have any ill will towards Samsung or anything. It's just if they had the feature set, I would see them as like a competitor to like picking up an LG. But since they don't, and it doesn't really fit my needs. So, but I think we had a couple more questions. I was trying to see, then we're gonna wrap it up. It's been almost 2 hours. Holy cow! What? This is my longest live stream. I am sorry, Elon. Got so much stuff to do. He was telling me all of his plans before we got on. And, he was
that's why I wanted to do Saturday morning, because I bet my girls are just staring at YouTube or something
for playing Minecraft.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's see. So I think that I see two here. So, hi guys. David McNair asks, I know the Epson 6050 is a good projector for under $3,000 or 3,000 pounds. Is that pounds?
3,000 pounds. Yeah.
3,000. 100,000. Your Majesty. If anybody gets that reference. I'll just say it's Willy Wonka. Anything else I should look at in that price range? Room is a bat cave. Cheers. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't have much. I think Elon even said earlier that he doesn't really use projectors that much. I don't know how much the Epson 5040 UB is. That's a very popular choice. I can look it up real quick.
Aren't the Sony projectors really good too?
I think so, yeah. Looks like you can get like the 5040 UB for about $4,000, $3,000 for the 5050. See, I don't know enough about them to recommend. I was just looking at prices, so it's just hard to like, say, oh yeah, like if we had like Michael Youthman on the stream, he could definitely be like, he knows way more about projectors than either of us, I think.
So does Chris Majestic.
Yes, him too.
Yeah, he does a lot of projectors, ultra short throw and everything in between. So you might want to check out his channel.
Yeah, definitely. I really like his videos too. Maybe we'll get a live stream with all of us, like 50 people.
I love. It just seems like Chris Majestic is like always happy. So that's why I like watching his videos.
Right. If I'm feeling down, I watch his videos.
Yeah.
Let's see. Bjorn Fu. I hope I say that. Bjorn. I think that's right. Any idea how I can hear Atmos from Amazon Prime with a full HD TV and a Marantz 1711 5.2.2 setup?
Just as long as you have some sort of streamer going directly into your Marantz.
Yep. So like if you're trying to use ARC or something, I don't know if whatever TV you have might not even support ARC. It definitely won't support Dolby Atmos over ARC. If it's just a 1080p, more than likely it's way before that. Might not even support ARC. But yeah, something like an Apple TV or Apple 4K TV, Amazon Fire Stick, or an NVIDIA Shield would be your best bet there. So let's see. Everyday Jay asked, did you guys reach out to Valencia Seating or did they contact you? I'm looking to review their stuff. They reached out to me. I can't speak for, do you have any stuff? Have you reviewed anything for Valencia?
No, I haven't.
Well, he might now. I'll send him this video. No, they reached out to me. I had reached out to them a long time ago, never heard anything back. So, yeah, they asked me would I be interested, and we kind of went back and forth, and they were super awesome to work with. So I would definitely just reach out to them if you're looking at reviewing their stuff, and provide them with like some info about like where you're gonna post a review and stuff, and they do like they go per creator basis or whatever. So no problem there.
No problemo.
No problem. Any recommendation on near field subwoofer compared to front stage? Bigger subwoofer in near field or front stage? So these we have 2 questions left. So any questions that are posted after the next 2 that we do won't be answered. So apologies, but we are running at almost 2 hours. So for me, I would go. This is just my personal preference. I have 2 near fields behind me. They're 12-inch woofers. I say behind me, it's each seat. We have 2 seats, so one behind each seat, about 3 to 5 inches away. You want them as close as possible.
Yeah.
Like I made sure I could still fully recline the seat, but they're as close as possible. Otherwise, you're not. If you're like a foot away, I wouldn't really consider that near field. Maybe like between near field and far field. But for me, having the bigger woofers up front to fill the room is probably like what I would recommend doing, or at least trying, because you got to think those subwoofers are going to be so close to you that you're going to feel everything.
Yeah.
Like, and you definitely want to make sure those are calibrated properly. Otherwise you're going to like get launched out of your seat, or like you're going to be feel when people like, Optimus Prime is talking, you're going to feel all of that stuff. Exactly. And that you don't want that. You want it to accentuate, similar to how like bass shakers or transducers work. You want to really make sure that those are pushing out those really lower frequencies. You might feel more than you maybe should below 30 hertz, because you really should only feel things like kind of 20 hertz or below. But it does add to kind of the overall effect, and it doesn't mean that you can listen at lower volumes.
True. Yeah.
So I would say bigger subwoofers in the front stage, and then if you wanted to do like, say you had like 13s or 16s in the front, you could do like 12s in the back, like in your near field subs. Words are hard; they're difficult. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, just exactly that.
Cool.
Bigger up front, and then near fields behind if you need to.
Absolutely.
Or
All right.
want to.
Exactly. Right. I will say near fields add a lot when they're done properly.
I honestly haven't had experience with that to
No?
have near fields close behind me. So.
I think for like a room that big, you definitely want 4 sub. Like the ideal situation would be 4 subs in like set up like in the corners of the room or wherever,
Right.
mini DSP'd, and then 2 subs behind you, because you do lose a lot of, like, when you put a sub in the center of the room, you're going to lose a lot of that. Like if you're measuring it, anything below like 30 hertz, you're going to lose a lot of output on, but you're actually going to feel it because the driver's actually moving or pushing that energy right there. It's right behind you. So you're going to feel it, but you won't necessarily hear most of it. You're going to hear everything basically, 40 to 50 hertz above.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I would definitely keep in mind. Okay. Last question. We'll wrap it up here. Any interest, I'm not going to pronounce, I don't know how to pronounce that name. Any interest using Mad VR with a TV? So I'm familiar with like Mad VR and Lubigen. If we're talking about like their separate processors, then I think it's like, I was looking at the Mad VR NV Extreme at Cedia, which is like $13,000 or something like that. That is basically more than my entire system costs.
Yeah.
So depending, for me, it really depends on the size of the TV, how good the tone mapping for HDR and stuff is, and can you justify the cost of like a Mad VR or Lumigen. I will say with like Mad VR, I wouldn't use like an NV Extreme for gaming because the latency that's added is pretty severe. It's kind of how they do all their magic and stuff, from what I understand. I personally, with my current setup, I think it would be absolutely unnecessary for like a lot of displays. I know they push their tone mapping and stuff really hard, but most of the time, especially like, I would rather pay a professional to calibrate my TV than spend the money for that. And then I don't know that for a TV, especially if you're sitting super far away or even the optimum distance, you probably won't notice a massive difference. You won't notice a $13,000 difference, in my opinion.
Right.
So, do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Are you ready to go?
I don't know Mad VR. So
Yeah, I mean, it's a processor. Yeah, exactly. It's basically a processor that will map, like, it does a bunch of different things. They have a free version that, like, if you have a home theater PC, you get a lot of the features in there. I don't know if you get HDR tone mapping and all that stuff, but it's cool to check out. If it's something like that where it's like I could try it for free on my PC, if that's how I consume my content, then I would definitely like at least try it and decide then if I like it or not. But $13,000 is a big ask to try out something, right? That on a 77-inch OLED from 6-7 feet away, I don't know that it would be worth it. So, they did say that the HDR tone mapping is available on the PC build. I might have to actually try that at some point, just to kind of see the difference between like what the LG can do with its both dynamic and tone mapping, or dynamic tone mapping and static tone mapping, because you can never really turn the tone mapping off unless you're in HGig mode on those. But yeah, that is definitely something I will be interested in checking out. Might do a video on. Who knows?
Hey.
Who knows? I need to get more into the video side. Do mostly audio stuff, but I want to get back into the video side of things because I think that's important. I'd say audio is at least 50% of the experience, if not more, but video can still be important. So, and making sure that you're not watching stuff in vivid mode and that you're getting a somewhat accurate image is definitely worth it. But thank you again, Elon, so much for joining the live stream. It was absolute pleasure having you on and talking to you about the home theater build. I know we went off topic a ton and talked about a bunch of different fun stuff, but we've been maintaining like 25 to 30 viewers this whole time. So I think the people that did watch are super awesome. Thank you for joining us. The audience, the viewers, thank you for joining us. And yeah, thank you again for watching. And that is the end of the live stream.
Bye.